Okay, the battery life in iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, it's not good. It's actually worse than the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. It is surprising given that the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max has the newer processor A16 Bionic that has all the optimization built in to support all of the new features that Apple released with the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. Now, two of those features that are consuming more battery is the always on display and the peak brightness feature that delivers 2000 nits peak brightness when using in sunlight or in environments where it can automatically increase the brightness of your phone. So I'm not sure what's going on. It could very well be the always on display. It could very well be that peak brightness feature. It could also very well be some bugs in the iOS 16. That said, I don't think you need to wait for Apple. We can change few settings in the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max and extend the battery life you have, which I think is now very essential given how bad the battery drain is in the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. So what are those settings? Well, the first one is always on display, right? So the best option, if you don't want to consume more battery and extend your battery life, just turn it off. You can go to settings, display, and then turn off the always on display. Now, of course, you bought the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max to enjoy the always on display, right? So what other options do I get to tweak the always on display? Well, unfortunately, there are no more options. Like you can't decrease the brightness or you can't say, I don't want to see the wallpaper. But guess what? There is a hidden setting. If you're using focus modes, you can dim the lock screen further down to almost as if the screen is turned off, and that's the dim the lock screen option. So if you are using focus modes, just go into one of your focus modes, tap on options, and you'll have the option to dim the lock screen there. Now if you enable that, you almost get a grayscale always on display with the top widget followed by the time and any other widgets you have. The wallpaper is dimmed, the brightness is really low, and this is a nice way to optimize the always on display in your 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, and it will save you a ton of battery life so that you can extend using this setting and not just have the default always on mode. Now I use focus modes a lot, so this has helped me. But if you're not using focus modes, I recommend you to use those. Try them out, right? I'll also link a video to my detailed explanation of the focus modes, which will help you to create and manage focus modes in your iPhone. The second one is the peak brightness that we talked about, right? When it comes to adjusting the brightness, you have few options. If you go to your control center, you can adjust the brightness, bring it down, bring it up, but there isn't a way to manage the auto brightness setting. Well, there is a hidden setting. If you go into settings, accessibility, and then tap on display, scroll down to the bottom, you have the option to enable or disable the auto brightness. Now, if you disable the auto brightness, then you control the brightness of the iPhone and it doesn't automatically increase the brightness depending on the environment you're in. So those two settings are very specific to the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, and I think that is what is draining the battery life right now. So hopefully Apple can fix those two issues. Now apart from that, there are few things that might be consuming or draining the battery life. Now Apple does use a new cellular modem in the 14 series. So the cellular modem is something that is known to drain your battery life, especially if it's trying to search and get the signal, right? Now, in the United States, we have 5G everywhere, but we haven't really seen the benefit of 5G. Like, I'm still happy with the LTE signal that I get here in the United States than, searching for the 5G signal. So for example, at my home, I don't have 5G signal. I only get LTE. So to extend your battery life, you can actually tell your iPhone to always connect to the LTE network and not choose the 5G network. If you go into settings and tap on cellular, and then if you tap on data options, there you will have the option to set the cellular connectivity mode to either 5G on, 5G auto, or LTE. And you can actually see Apple telling you right there that if you select 5G auto, it can consume battery life. And having 5G on, it will consume 5G when it knows it can save your battery life. So that could be something happening there that is actually draining more battery life in your 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max that Apple could fix in an iOS 16 update. But until then, if you're someone that doesn't need 5G, like just switch it to LTE and save some battery and be happy. Next two are basic things. Like I go through these every now and then and make sure like there are no rogue apps draining the battery life, right? So every app you install, like I don't know, I have around like 60 to 70 apps in my iPhone. I'm pretty sure there are folks that have like 100 or 200, right? And all of these apps do some background jobs such that it fetches maybe, a weather app could fetch the weather information, for example, right? And if you put widgets in your home screen and lock screen, they could also be doing things in the background. And that is going to consume battery life for sure. So if you're not sure which app is, consuming or draining your iPhone 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max battery, in fact, this works even for any iPhone you have, right? If you go into settings and then tap on general and then tap on the background apps refresh option, you can completely turn that off so no apps do any activity in the background, or you can select per app. So if you feel an app is maybe a culprit in draining your battery, you could just turn off the background app activity for that particular app. A very useful setting. Now, if all this fails and you want like a kill switch that would certainly save battery life, then you can turn on the low power mode. If you go into settings, battery, you will have the low power mode that you can turn on. Now, the simpler way to do is if you go into settings and control center, you can actually add the low power mode option in the control center. So now if you swipe down to go to the control center, and there with a single tap, you can enable the low power mode. I've enabled this several times depending on where I am. Maybe I am going on a trip and I just want to save the battery. I just turn on low power mode. Now this does optimize several things. Number one, it actually like turns off the background activity, right? Because we know that consumes battery life. It also does many other things. So beware that your experience may change when you turn on the low power mode, but this is a great way to extend your iPhone battery life, and certainly would apply for the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. So yeah, the battery life is not as good as we expected in the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. Now, here's a weird fact. The battery capacity is actually slightly less in the 14 Pro Max when you compare it with the 13 Pro Max. So there could be something happening there. But let's wait and see if Apple releases an update. Hey, if Apple doesn't fix this problem, you got few things to try out and see if that extends your battery life in the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to get more tips and tricks, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button so you get notified about the new videos. Until next time, bye.